Assalamu alaikum, program Perspectives, and I'm your host Morai. Viewers, we discuss any subject or a topic in greater details from various perspectives. An intellectual, a writer, and an analyst. Syed Mohibullah Shah Sahab is with us. Shah Sahab, Assalamu alaikum. Shah Sahab, today's topic is the Great Game.
Yes.
Which started in 19th century and is still continuing in different ways. Now, my first question is, what is meant by Great Game?
Yes, Mohibullah, it's a very interesting and a very, very important topic. And as you said, it is started from 19th century, and in different shapes and forms, it has continued till today. So it is relevant today also, and it was important historically as well. Now, Great Game basically is the name given to great power rivalry, the big power rivalry of influence over different areas. Now, this name, interestingly, was given by a very well-known English writer, Rudyard Kipling, who also spent many years here in India, and his famous book is Kim. Now, he mentions this word, which has now become very, very popular, the Great Game. This is actually when the start of it was. He gave this name to the rivalry between the British Empire and the Russian Empire. And he called it a game between great powers. He called it a game because these two big powers, they were not engaging any direct war with each other, but they were using every other tactic, how to expand their influence and authority to greater areas. They were using diplomacy, they were using spying, they were buying leaders, they were threatening and bullying the leaders of different smaller countries and others in trying to expand their influence over a larger territory. Now, the British Empire, as we know, when the East India Company came, they had their headquarters in Calcutta, far away into the east. Russian Empire had their capital in Moscow, far into the northern European area. And they both started to encroach upon the areas and territories of other countries. As we know, the East India Company first started and conquered Bengal, Siraj-ud-Dawla and Mir Jafar, everybody knows, and then to Mysore and Tipu Sultan and Mir Sadiq, everybody knows about that, and then to other provinces and states of Indian subcontinent, to Rajasthan, to Awadh, or what is called UP, or central states, and slowly and gradually coming to Sindh, to Punjab, Balochistan, and then having wars, Anglo-Afghan wars, and part of Afghan territory was also captured, and where there is a During line. So from Calcutta, far away in the east, the British Empire started to move from east. It came to west, up to Bombay, for instance, and to Sindh, and from south, in Madras, it went all the way up to Peshawar. Now it was expanding. It was moving to the north. Now, in the north, was the Russian Empire, Tsarist Russia, headquartered far away in northern Europe, in Moscow. But then, that was also expanding their influence and conquering areas in the east and in the south. Tataristan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Samarkand, Bukhara, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, coming up to the borders of Afghanistan. Now from here, from east, the British Empire was moving up to the north and west. And from the west and north, the Russian Empire was coming to the east. They did not want to meet each other. So they created a buffer, Afghanistan. It could have been conquered, but neither wanted to come and have their armies face each other, because then, if something happens, or a skirmish comes about or happens, then it might lead to the actual war between the two great powers. So they did not want to have common border. So they created this buffer. Neither England or the British Empire will control it, conquer it, nor the Russians will conquer it. So it was a buffer. Now, that influence trying to expand areas but not come in direct conflict with each other. This game between the British Empire and the Russian Empire continued, and in the early 20th century, about 1907, they reached an agreement that, okay, no more, we will not try to work against each other. Now, why did they reach this agreement in 20th century, in say 1907? The reason was that a third power had become very important, and both were afraid of third power. So they said, okay, let us not play games against each other, because there is a third power which is now threatening both Russia as well as Britain. And the third power was the rise of Germany. What had happened was, as these two powers were trying to play their games, Germany had the chancellor there in 19th century, Bismarck. Germany was also a collection of various states, like India was collection of various provinces and states. But then Bismarck had collected, unified all these states into one Germany, and they became very powerful. So now they both, Russia and the British Empire, they both said, okay, now both are threatened by the rise of Germany as a third power. So let us stop the games that we play against each other. And they joined hands against Germany, which is what you see. What happens was, this is 1907 when this agreement came, and 7 years later, in 1914, the First World War started. When Germany and England, they fought the war against each other. And initially, the Germany was very successful.
This is the Second World War.
Even the First World War.
Yes.
The First World War. It went expanded. In fact, that First World War, you see, in terms of now talking about this great game, in the First World War, the German Empire had friendly relations with the Turkish Empire. And Turkish Empire, or Ottoman Empire, had controlled the Arab countries of the Middle East. They were all part of it. Now, while the war between Germany and England was going on, then England sent spies, intelligence network and spies, tried to incite the Arab revolt against Ottoman Empire. Now this character about which the movie has also been made, Lawrence of Arabia. Lawrence of Arabia was also a spy, an intelligence agent of the British Empire. And he dressed as an Arab leader and worked as a friend of Arab in order to spite them, incite them against the Turkish Empire, which is what happened. That at the end of the World War, as Germany was defeated, Ottoman Empire was also defeated, and all these Arab countries now became out of the control of Ottoman Empire, but they came under British control. They did not become independent, became under the British control. So what we are saying here, the great game which first started between these two empires, it took a different shape. And same spies were used, intelligence network, how to break the Ottoman Empire. Now as we go into the second, then we'll talk about how it moved further.
Let's meet after the break. Welcome back. Shah Sahab, you explained candidly about this great game up to the end of the First World War. Now, how this great game shaped after the First World War?
Okay, now at the end of the World War I, as we are talking about, the British Empire, through its own network of spies, broke away the Arab countries from Ottoman Empire. The game then moved now into the Middle East between the First and the Second World War. And then we'll talk about how Russia became powerful, and then the great game between Russian, Soviet Union, and the United States. But after the First World War, between the First and the Second World War, this was a time which was shaped, in which the Middle East was shaped by actually the intelligence agents and the spies of British and the French country. France and Britain, they shaped the shape of the Middle East, and they divided this. Various Arab countries, most of them were taken under the control of the British Empire, and only Syria and Lebanon, they were given into the control of the French. And this is where the issue of Palestine also started, in this game of dividing countries, irrespective of what the people wanted. But because of their own great power interest, these two victorious powers of the World War I, England and France, they divided the Middle East among themselves from their interests without. These are artificial boundaries, and this is why the Middle East is still in trouble. There are still wars being fought between different Middle Eastern countries, although they are people of the same faith, people of the same race, people of the same culture. You remember, you see, wars between Iraq and Kuwait, for instance. The instability in Lebanon, for instance. The wars over Palestine and the creation of the state of Israel. And then Jordan and Syria and Egypt, they're fighting wars for Palestine with Israel. But so, the whole Middle East has been in turmoil because of the great game played by these spies in trying to carve out this Middle East. But as the Second World War came, which again, the Second World War came, as you were talking about earlier, after the defeat of Germany in the First World War, Hitler came to power in an appeal to German population that they have been wronged, there have been a lot of injustice done to them, especially under the Treaty of Versailles, which was signed in 1990, to impose some very severe conditions on Germany. So Hitler raised and created Germany into another powerful country, and therefore we had the Second World War. But after the Second World War, what happened was the British Empire lost its power and significance because it had lost so much in the First World War, then in the Second World War, and it was not able then to play the role of a big power, which it was playing in the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century. Now the big powers that became after the World War II were Soviet Union and the United States. These are the two big powers. The others, Germany, France, or England, they became lower and not as powerful to influence the other countries as Soviet Union and the United States were. So now the great game was played between Soviet Union and the United States. The first great game was between British Empire and the Russian Tsarist Empire. Then after, between the First World War and Second World War, there's not much happening in terms of great power rivalry, except that the Middle East was in turmoil. And it was in turmoil because the spies of Britain and France, Lawrence being one of them, and the most famous, Lawrence of Arabia, they divided the Arab countries' artificial boundaries, and which created turmoil and fights and conflicts, which are still continuing in the Middle East. But after the Second World War, the two major powers, big powers that emerged was Soviet Union on one side, United States on the other side, and then there was the great game between the two. And that was one trying to influence the new countries to come into their camp. There was a Soviet camp and there was a, let us say, the American camp. And although there was no war fought between Soviet Union and United States directly, same thing, not to fight the wars directly, not to engage in war against each other directly, but to use the proxies, either to expand the influence or fight through somebody else, not directly. And we saw this happening. If we remember that in 60s, there was Cuban Missile Crisis, when the Soviet Union had placed missiles, nuclear missiles in Cuba in order to keep control over the Soviet Union. And there was a threat of the war between the two countries. When the negotiations, diplomacy came into play, those nuclear warheads were removed from Cuba back to Soviet Union, but an agreement, the Soviet Union succeeded in reaching an agreement that United States will not capture and colonize Cuba. Okay, you want Cuba is our friend. We have put missiles in there to defend it or to keep it or to keep you in check, but we don't want to fight the war with each other. Soviet Union and America, two nuclear powers. This will be very destructive for the whole world, including both countries. So, okay, we reach an agreement. Cuba will not be bothered by the United States, we'll take the missiles back. So that was one way of the...
That was a small country near
Yes,
USA.
yeah. So Cuba is still there, independent, and no interference, and they have been changing government, Fidel Castro, then his brother Raul Castro, and now somebody else. So it was an example of a great game, rivalry between two countries, major powers over a small country, but settled by diplomacy without war. Then, of course, we have right here next door in Afghanistan in 1980s. And actually, it was a battle between Soviet Union and the United States. The battleground happened to be in Afghanistan. But actually, it was the Soviet Union and United States who were fighting through the proxies, whether Mujahideen or whatever, and Pakistan had a role to play into this. And as it is.
In fact, Pakistan was pushed by US to play the role.
Yeah, it was pushed by United States to play on behalf of the United States, to play that role. And our society and our economy is still suffering because of that.
Up to 1980, there was a loan of rupees US $1 billion US up to 1980 on Pakistan. Now it has risen to the...
Yeah, now it's about $57 billion, yes, which is true, because then, the whole Pakistan suffered in many ways. Society of Pakistan, economy of Pakistan, governance of Pakistan. So, as it happens, in the fight between elephants, it's the grass and the smaller things which suffer. Now here again, the best thing is to keep away. But in Cuba, diplomacy played an important role, and everything was settled peacefully by diplomacy. Here in Afghanistan, instead of diplomacy, it was the proxy war that was fought over there. And Soviet Union over there, America over there. Subsequently, by 1991, Soviet Union, by internal movements and external things and many other factors, which is a chapter by itself to be discussed separately, but then Soviet Union disintegrated. And in 1991, America became the sole superpower. So this rivalry between Soviet Union and the United States, that rivalry ended in 1991. Now we'll see how the rivalry came with another superpower that was developing.
We'll meet after the break. Welcome back. Shah Sahab, you have explained the great game up to 1991. Now, in this last episode or last part of the program, how would you discuss about great game right from 91 till this time?
Okay. Now in 1991, the United States became one single superpower. The rivalry ended with Soviet Union. So it became such a superpower that it had no rival, it had no competitive power from any other side. And that became became very bad, very difficult for many countries. Because that rivalry sometimes, it helps the smaller countries and it protects them. But when there is, let us say, only one lion in the jungle, then the smaller animals, they are at a risk, at the mercy of that one lion. So when United States became a single superpower with no rivalry, it carried out many wars. Let us see, the war in Iraq, 2003, War they started over there. Then war in Libya. The war in Iraq destroyed. It was the United States attacking Iraq for no reason whatsoever. But it was the power, it had no fear, no competing power. There was no Soviet Union to compete or to check it like it checked in Cuba. So Iraq was destroyed. Even these days it is in huge big trouble. Then the United States also attacked Libya. Muammar Gaddafi was killed. In Iraq, Saddam Hussein was killed. Libya also has been destroyed, broken into 2 or 3 countries over there. The same thing is also, look at what is happening in Palestine. Israel is getting full backing of American superpower and is able to defy United Nations resolutions, couldn't care. International Court of Justice decisions, Israel doesn't care. United Nations General Assembly resolutions, nothing matters. So because it is protected and helped by one sole superpower, and it thinks that no other country will interfere. And America has sent its naval armored into the Mediterranean along the side of Israeli coast, so that no country can attack Israel. Israel has freedom to do whatever it wants, protected by the sole superpower. However, as this has been happening in the Middle East, and as we saw after 1991, Iraq and then Libya and even Lebanon and Palestine, the American superpower did whatever it wanted and it destroyed many countries. In the meantime, what was happening, a new big power was emerging, quietly, peacefully, which had not yet engaged in any war, but was concentrating on developing itself into a major big power. And that major power finally came on the world stage in the beginning of the 21st century. Let's say if we are now talking into 2025, 24, then maybe about 15 years or so, around 2010 or so, China became economically first as a major economic power, and slowly it started to gather its military strength also, because its economy was so prosperous. It's now the second largest economy in the world, and it's quite possible that in another 10 years or so, its GDP will be larger than the United States also. So now America has an economic rivalry. The gap after 1991, up to 91 there was this competition or this rivalry between America and the Soviet Union. Then Soviet Union disappeared. America became superpower, but in the meantime, China rose, and now it has become a major power in the early 21st century. As we said, its economy is second largest. It's going to be even larger than America in another 5 to 10 years. All right. So now this great game has now started in Asia between the United States and China. How is this taking shape? America is now entering into various alliances with various countries in order to strengthen its position and come closer to China. It has agreements with India, it has agreements with Japan, it has agreements with Australia. All 3 countries are closer to China compared to United States. Now, the Chinese economy may be strong, but militarily it is not yet as strong as the United States. The United States military budget is more than the military budget of any other 8 or 10 countries, for instance. It's so huge. So then China has gotten close, let us say, trying to build up an alliance so that it can protect itself. So there's been alliance closely between China and Russia in terms of joining in case of something happening. The two powers, they have come closer. Diplomatically, China and Russia are playing another role of trying to build an alliance politically and diplomatically and economically. And that alliance is the BRICS, which is a combination of 5 countries originally: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now, last year, they added another 5 countries, which is Iran, UAE, Saudi Arabia, 3, Ethiopia, 4, Egypt, 5. So now, the BRICS is now a group of 10 countries, mainly economically working together, but also providing a diplomatic platform. Militarily, China is trying to ally with Russia so that they can mutually strengthen themselves. But there is another angle in terms of China and American rivalry. Now that rivalry, apart from what I talked about, how the United States is building up this, and China has, joined with Russia to encourage BRICS to become larger. There is another role also where Pakistan enters into the field in this rivalry also, as it played a role in the Russian and Soviet Union and the American rivalry and the Afghanistan issue had come up. Now the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, is actually an extension of China's economic diplomacy and influence through Pakistan into Middle East and Africa. The United States also sees this, that it is going to expand Chinese influence into this area. Therefore, you will find number of things happening through various proxies, through various elements, how to exercise control. Each side, each of the major power is trying to extend their influence, and it so happens that Pakistan, especially its province of Balochistan, is now the central point, because the CPEC, it starts from China, comes through, and it ends in Gwadar. And one of the main objectives would be of having a pipeline, oil pipeline, to bring oil from either Iran or Saudi Arabia or of Kuwait, and run a pipeline from Gwadar through Pakistan into China. If it happens like this, then China imports oil by ships now from the Gulf. It goes all the way to Singapore, Malaysia, to South China Sea, 12,000 miles. Instead of 12,000 miles, if this oil pipeline from Gwadar into Kashgar in China goes, it will reduce the cost by 25%. America also knows, China also knows the advantage of this, and America would try to see that it doesn't happen. What I'm saying is that energy is the now bone of contention. And if an oil line or a gas line comes from Turkmenistan through Pakistan to India, Tapi, or Iran, Pakistan, or India pipeline, both of these pipelines will run through Afghanistan, through Balochistan, and then go there. Now this is another pipeline of energy also going from Gwadar to China. So energy is the main bone of contention, and Pakistan and its province of Balochistan have a central place in this new great game which is now being played. Let us hope that it is peaceful and doesn't lead to any conflict.
Thank you, Shah Sahab. Viewers, you can watch this program on Thursday at 7 p.m. Same day at 12 midnight, and next day, Friday, after 8 2 p.m. Goodbye.